Anyone who's been a caregiver or even close to one knows that 24/7 care is, well, it's relentless. It's a full-on commitment. And getting a break isn't some luxury. It's an absolute necessity, to keep from burning out. And it seems like the system gets that. At least, on paper, there's a promise of rest. And there it is, right from the Standards of Community Living, British Columbia. The official policy makes a really clear promise. You get a funded 2-day break every single month. It's called Respite. And it sounds so simple, right? So supportive. But is it really? All right, let's really get into this and pull apart why that promise so often just stays a promise. We're going to look at how it's designed, who ends up carrying the responsibility, and what that actually means for people on the ground through a couple of pretty telling cases. So, how does the system actually deliver on this promise of a break? Well, here's the first catch. The money for those 2 days of respite, it's not set aside in its own little pot. Instead, it's all bundled into one lump sum that the caregiver gets every month. And this chart really shows you the problem perfectly. See that slice for respite? It's just one piece of a much bigger pie that's supposed to cover everything. And I mean everything. Housing, food, transportation, all the client's daily needs. So trying to pull money out for respite gets complicated fast because every single dollar already has a job to do. That bundled funding is really just the beginning of the maze. Let's say a caregiver actually finds a way to budget for it. Now they have to find someone to provide that 2-day break. And you have to ask, what does a person have to go through just to be allowed to help out? And wow, the list of hurdles is something else. Just look at this. To be a respite provider, you face all these costs, both upfront and ongoing. You've got to pay for police checks for everyone in your home. Your car insurance goes up. You need to have a whole dedicated furnished spare room and make sure your home meets all these safety standards. And after all that, the little income you make is taxable, and there's not even a guarantee you'll get regular work. So this whole design creates a huge problem, right? It's basic supply and demand. The financial hurdles, the hassle, it all means there's a massive shortage of people who are willing and qualified to do this. You just have to ask, who on earth is actually motivated by this kind of math to offer just 1 or 2 days of care a month? So the system's design doesn't just create a shortage of help, it then completely outsources the problem. Guess who has to solve the logistical nightmare of finding this incredibly rare, qualified person? Yep, it falls right on the shoulders of the caregiver, the very person who's already nearing burnout and desperate for that break in the first place. Let's just be really clear about what's happening here. This is a total transfer of labor. The system says, we know you need rest, but then it turns around and says, and by the way, it's your job to arrange it. It's a classic case of seeing a problem, but just stepping back and letting the person who's drowning figure out how to find a life raft. Now, if you thought it couldn't get any more complicated, well, let's see how specific agency rules can take a really tough situation and make it almost absurd. These two examples really show how bizarre the conditions can get. First up, with the Strive agency, they came up with a move-in rule. Get this. It wasn't in any contract. They just insisted that respite could only happen if the relief provider literally moved into the caregiver's home for those 2 days. It completely blurs the line between getting a break and suddenly having to manage a house guest. And then you have the IFRC agency. Their contract had this little clause right here. Basically, it makes the primary caregiver, the one trying to get a break, legally responsible for making sure the respite provider follows all the rules of a contract that they aren't even a party to. The agency is basically passing its own job of oversight onto the person they're supposed to be helping. So when you put all of these pieces together, you've got the bundled funding, the huge barriers for new providers, the responsibility being shifted back onto the caregiver, and these impossible agency rules, a really clear and frustrating contradiction starts to take shape. So here's the bottom line. The system says, out loud, that 24/7 care is not sustainable without rest. It acknowledges it. But then its own design, from the way it's funded to all the bureaucratic red tape, actively blocks the path to actually getting that rest. The promise is completely undermined by the process. And that leaves us with this one critical question. This isn't really about pointing fingers at individuals or saying one agency is bad. It's about the architecture of the whole system. If everyone agrees that rest is essential for the system to even work, then why is the path to that rest so fundamentally broken? It's a question that doesn't point to the people, but to the very design itself.